There is a very familiar reference in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 11, verses 24 to 25, that speaks of a house that's cleared of evil. But once clear, the evil one returns with even more demons and takes up residence again. The result is worse than the original condition. This gospel story is often quoted to me by people who are struggling with scrupulosity. They say, well, as bad as it is, at least I know what's coming. If I try to get rid of it or manage it, God only knows what might come next. In a sense, referencing the story of Jesus is understandable because it indicates how deep the fear and the anxiety has rooted itself in the experience of the person who's suffering. On the other hand, it is also despairing of hope, accepting the weakened condition rather than engaging the struggle to change the experience and the circumstances. Learning to manage your scrupulosity is not an easy spiritual journey. It's a risk, and it does demand difficult and consistent effort to learn how to manage the compulsions and the supporting rituals and obsessions. It requires encountering fear, especially the fear of the unknown. And this encounter is real, it's not imagined. The feeling and the emotions are authentic and deeply felt. It takes real courage and sustained commitment to act against this kind of fear and anxiety. These emotions are often rooted in shame, guilt, disgust, and the entangling experiences of distress that seem to spiral down, boring deeper and deeper into the gut as they hang on to maintain control. It takes real courage to accurately interpret the meaning of what is really happening, rather than falling prey to a meaning that is false and misleading, but feels nonetheless somehow real and convincing. Spiritual direction and therapy often fail the person who is seeking support and direction because the depth of what is truly being experienced is not taken seriously enough. It really does not do any good to tell a person who is suffering to ignore your feelings and act against them because they are not real. It does not help to tell a person who is experiencing this kind of struggle, what you're feeling is not really real. You just think it is. No, it is really real and truly felt and experienced. It may well be true that the experience is being generated by something that is being misinterpreted, but that does not mean it does not feel real. And it does not mean that it's not convincing. How can something feel so real, but also be misleading? It may be illustrative to think of this experience in the context of another experience that can be informative and which shares essential characteristics, but in a different manner. Think of the very popular virtual reality experiences that are easily available. There's one such experience in which you purchase a seat in a movie theater, and once seated in your seat and firmly secured to the floor of the theater, you virtually experience the flight of an eagle as it soars over the Grand Canyon and other natural experiences, each of which are virtually seen through the eyes of the eagle. It does not matter how many times you tell yourself you're not actually flying. You feel like you're flying. And the rush of emotion and feelings is very much real. It would not make much of a difference if someone sitting next to you would say, now remember, this is not real. You just think it's real. It doesn't change the experience. It doesn't alter the feeling. Your palms are still sweating. Your heart's still beating faster, even if you are secured in your theater chair. This may be a somewhat useful reference and illustration for what may be happening in a therapy session or spiritual direction conversation. Spiritual direction in therapy is very helpful if the person who is trying to guide you and to encourage you in your journey accepts the reality of what you are feeling, the reality of what you are experiencing. It's both helpful and effective if it helps you to understand what you are experiencing, but also provides you with a way to effectively manage what you're feeling in a more positive manner. In other words, to walk with you as you determine to feel the fear, risk the change that you desire, feel the full brunt of the wave of feelings and emotions that will try and distract you from a healthy decision, and then help you to navigate through a new experience that is unknown, but which is a healthier and more spiritual path for you. Returning to the story of Jesus and the house that is swept clean of the resident devil, only to be filled with new devils who now enjoy a nice clean house that they can mess up, there's no guarantee that once you prepare a new space, that the space will be occupied by another challenge. That is a risk and a possibility, but that's also where your therapist and spiritual director can provide a very helpful service to you. They can be vigilant in their support and encouragement of your healthy growth. They can help you to see when you are faltering, or perhaps when you have tired of the struggle and are willing to settle for something that is not fully accomplished or half-baked, to use another example that may be helpful. They cannot do the work for you, but they can provide you with the tools, the support, and the necessary encouragement to accomplish your goal of management. This new experience, relying on and accepting the help and support of another person as you walk the path of healing, often feels the riskiest. OCD and scrupulosity are very isolating in their manifestation. So very often a person who is suffering with this kind of disorder is suffering quietly, silently, and very much alone. In a sense, they have been convinced by the disorder that this kind of isolation is necessary in order to maintain the vigilance they believe is required and the commitment that is necessary for the all-consuming rituals and obsessions that accompany the disorder. They simply cannot invite anyone else into their experience, and so they become more and more isolated and alone. To enter into therapy and or spiritual direction reverses the isolation and drags the disorder into the light. Once in the light of day, obsessions are identified as obsessions and can no longer masquerade as necessary and appropriate behaviors. Rituals that have been protected and are now time-consuming as they take over more and more of your waking and even your sleeping hours, in some cases, cannot be maintained within a relationship. There are simply too many points of consequence and of challenge when another person recognizes what is happening and refuses to cooperate. Isolation solves all those problems, and that is why your experience of OCD is isolating. But the path to wholeness is a path out of the darkness into the light. How do you know that you are beginning to make this healthy transition out of the darkness and into the light? You know that you are effectively reorientating your choices and your directions when you hear yourself say to your therapist or spiritual director, "I am so ashamed to tell you what I have been doing." I understand the shame because it is an experience of vulnerability to share with another person what has been relegated to the darkness. But I also rejoice in the sharing. I hear the first steps towards healing. I hear the power of God's grace at work in the life of the person who is determined to move into a different direction. I'm aware of their vulnerability and acknowledge the vulnerability that they are sharing. But I also try and emphasize the power of the grace that is now at work. It is a remarkable stepping stone out of the darkness and into the light. Risky, yes. Painful, yes. Embarrassing, perhaps. But so healing, so necessary, so grace-filled. Something that should be celebrated. A source of gratefulness and of blessing. Engaging in useful conversations about your disorder with your spiritual director and with your therapist is a risk. But it is not the experience of risk that you may initially imagine it to be. It is not the risk of a more powerful and even evil experience, replacing what is already tormenting you. That is a misinterpretation. A desperate attempt by your disorder to paralyze you in crippling isolation. Your house can indeed be swept clean and remain clean and uncluttered through the power of grace. It is worth the work. It is well worth the effort.